Hello and you're very welcome to our special feature today on tourism in Cavan. I'm Angie Sutherland and we're here in beautiful West Cavan up in the Burren country where the Minister for Tourism, Transport and Sport, Leo Varadkar, will be joining us later on.
Well, here we are at I suppose it's the epicentre of the Burren itself, and such beautiful rugged landscape on such a beautiful day like this. Now it's a bit windy, but the sun's out and the sun is with us, and you can see dolmens, monolithic tombs, Neolithic tombs, all sorts of things. This is Cavan. This is tens of thousands of years old, and it's here in County Cavan, West Cavan actually. Just look at this for a sight. Isn't that incredible? And that's all. This is all in West Cavan, County Cavan, and it hasn't been touched for thousands and thousands of years. A lot of clearance, but that gives you a sign of just what is going on. So much to see. Walkers would love this. There are paths everywhere. Everything is signposted, so you can see what's leading to what and where, pointing you in the right direction. There's old houses. People lived here. We were discussing it before we came on air. It's just incredible. This is old Ireland. This is incredible stuff.
I'm talking now to Seamus O'Holtachan. Thanks very much for joining us, Seamus.
You're welcome.
So what's your involvement here today?
I've been studying this landscape for about 15 years. 15 years ago, well, it was always known that it was important archaeologically speaking, that there were about half a dozen tombs. Back 1997, 1998, myself and a friend of mine started exploring, surveying the landscape. We now have a total of about 150 geoarchaeological monuments here in an area of about 200 acres. So it is, I would make the claim that we're standing in what is the finest integrated relic landscape in Ireland.
Are you from around here, Seamus?
I'm from about a mile down the road,
Okay.
yes. I was born and reared.
So a lot of local knowledge.
Well, I suppose so, yeah. But it is a wonderful place. You have what I would term as well a palimpsest of history. That's one layer of history on top of another. For example, here we have the remains. The homestead was abandoned in the 1950s when the land was sold to the state for forestry. But behind it we have a megalithic tomb which was converted into an animal shelter at the end of the 19th century. It's a fascinating place. The whole thing is predicated on the abundance of stone. The stone being glacially deposited boulders of sandstone. Underneath it, the bedrock is limestone, given free drainage. And it was excellent rough grazing, I suppose, in times come by.
So it must be a very proud day for you then, Seamus, being a local and to actually be able to walk the Minister around and give him all the details.
It's a pretty good feeling, all right. It is, yeah. It is, yeah.
So Seamus, can you tell us a little bit about then, like, who inhabited this area?
Well, this area's been inhabited since the Stone Age, since the Neolithic, the late Stone Age. They were the first farmers. Came here 6,500 years ago. Ireland was totally forested then. They began clearing the forest, laying out field systems, grazing animals, growing crops. 6,500 years ago, 4,500 BC.
Great. That's a mine of information, Seamus.
But that farming tradition continued right up until 1954, when the last of the farmers left. Their names were McCaffreys. They had been, in the 19th century or early 20th century, they had been herdsmen looking after the cattle for a local small landlord. They bought out the estate, but they quickly sold it on. Ireland was crying out for timber at the time. We had no timber. 1% of Ireland, I think, was covered in timber. The government wanted timber. They bought them out to the Department of Lands, and it was planted in the early 1950s, 1954, 1955. So that brought to an end 6,000 years of farming.
Seamus, gur míle maith agat.
Maith agat. Tá fáilte ród.
Thank you.
I'm going to give this.
Very good,
to,
thank you.
Not too bad. How are you?
Richard Watson from Anna District Council.
Yeah.
Minister.
I'm Marie Warren, Heritage Officer, Cavan Council.
John Paul Peely, County Councillor. The other side, but you're still very welcome.
That'll be outside of Cavan, yeah?
Jim Nolan is the local expert on Burren.
Thank you.
There isn't a blade of grass that this man doesn't know here, so we're going to. You'll see that in a few minutes. I think you've met everybody. So we're going to kick off in a couple of minutes, but I suppose everyone, I'm sure, is speeched out of it. The Minister has a long day, so we're going to be very quick in terms of what we say. But first of all, I want to welcome Mr. Varadkar to the Burren on behalf of Cavan County Council. And there's two things I suppose I want to explain to him. One, I suppose, is the interagency nature of all this, and the second is the uniqueness of the site. In terms of interagency, we have here Gaeltacht and Bill Murphy, who's the head of recreation for Gaeltacht. Gaeltacht own the site here. This is their property. And Gaeltacht in the recreation department have major projects around the country over in Neffenbeg and Mayo, Lockheed and Boyle, and this particular site is amongst those gems. So they would see this site as a site of major uniqueness. How we've managed to get funding to develop it has been through interagency, or through the cross-border funding to Interreg. And in that regard, one of the key things is the fact that we're in the Marble Arch Caves Global Geopark. This is unique in that I think it's unique worldwide that it's a cross-border geopark. Fermanagh District Council were the first to develop it at the Marble Arch Caves, and if we can develop this on our side of the border, we'll have a very well balanced geopark and a site of very considerable tourism potential.
Welcome. People think there's only one Burren. It's quite a common name. It simply means a stony place. I said we're going to visit just a handful of sites here today, but I could bring you to 150 sites within 300 acres, within 124 hectares. It is the whole archaeology, the whole is dependent upon stone, and we'll go look at a stone first of all beside us here. The bedrock here is limestone, but scattered all over the place. You probably saw huge boulders, or to quartzite sandstone, glacial erratics who were brought here during the last ice age. That everything is predicated, practically the whole building, from prehistoric times until relatively recent times, utilised the freestone or the sandstone, which was weather resistant, which did not break down with the weather like limestone does, and okay, it was materials for prehistoric people, for their megalithic tombs, their hut sites, their field walls. It was the material for 19th, early 20th century farmers for their cattle sheds. Now we put in here and look at what we're talking about, the glacial erratic. Underneath we're looking at the glacial erratic. The sandstone was carried on the back of the looking at a block of huge during the last ice age and deposited here, and when the ice melted approximately 13,000 years ago, it was deposited on the limestone bedrock. You can see what has happened over the millennia. The sandstone, which is insoluble, impermeable and inert, has acted as a cap for the permeable limestone underneath, creating a pedestal. Wonderful feature in its own right. There's one area of England with one glacial erratic has been designated an area of special scientific interest and conservation. We have hundreds of glacial erratics here. There must have been thousands because they've been used over the millennia. But you have the pedestal there, the limestone, because of erosion, the bedrock is going down all the time. The sandstone stands proud. Okay? The sandstone of the glacial erratic, as I said, was the raw material for building through the millennia, through the generations from prehistoric times right up until fairly recently. Something we've noticed recently, myself and a friend of mine, we studied this, we studied it over 15 years. 15 years ago they knew there was half a dozen megalithic tombs. Now we know that it's a whole complex of ancient hut sites, field systems and, let's say, modified glacial erratics. right? A lot of them have been modified to create maybe a semi-megalith or a prototype tomb. They've also been, let's call it, written on with with rock art or with sculpting. If you go to the back of that, you'll see it is impermeable, but it is carved. It's carved to a point at the top. It's carved, and there are channels and cup marks and rings down below it. Okay. Right, we'll go across the way to see how some of the sandstones. You can see the bedding of the sand from its formation in the delta of a tropical river some 330 million years ago. The limestones about 340 million years ago, created in the tropical sea south of the equator. We've come a bit from there. Shallow tropical sea, that's right. And the evidence is in the limestone underneath. It's full of fossils, coral fossils. Here we're looking at what's called the calf house, and 100 years ago it was used for sheltering animals, and probably right up into the 1950s. There's a photo from the 1930s with a door on that, but what in fact it is a reconstructed megalithic tomb. An antiquary writing in the 1870s, William Wakeman, describes the capstone sitting on 4 standing stones, each about 7 foot tall. Borlase in Installments of Ireland, I think it's 1897, describes it more or less as it is today. The conversion must have taken place over that period. Okay, with this walling built up probably towards the end of the 19th century to create the Alban shelter. And according to Wakeman's description, that was up there. It appears to be a stone missing, another stone on its side. This is quite unusual in Irish context, though. Bortle stones are usually that. Okay, here we have splayed, as it were, out. They're quite common. This is quite common in Wales, and most archaeologists believe this was the front of the tomb. Now, had that still been sitting on those, it would be one hell of an imposing structure.
I'm joined now by Tony Ferguson, who's the chairman of the Border Regional Authority. What's your involvement here today, Tony?
Well, earlier this afternoon we had the launch of a brochure at the Lough Erne Resort in Enniskillen, which covers the border region, which is 6 counties and 4 counties in the northern part of the country. This was a joint effort between ICBAN, which is the Irish Central Border Network, and the Border Regional Authority.
What counties are in it, Tony?
There's Fermanagh, Leitrim, Cavan, Donegal, Sligo, right over into Monaghan and Louth, and then in the north you have Tyrone and, as I said earlier, Fermanagh up into Armagh. So all of those counties are featured in this brochure, and today Minister Varadkar launched it for us. We were delighted to have him and also a Deputy First Secretary from one of the departments in the north.
Great, so it's been a busy day for you.
It's been a busy day, but isn't it lovely to be here in West Cavan? It's a beautiful part of the world.
And you organise the sun as well for us, Tony.
Yes. Well, that's easy to do. That's easy to do.
Have a look at this. Cup and ring Atlantic rock art. Alright? Same motifs are found all the way from Spain and Portugal, Iberian Peninsula, right to the Shetland Islands, right along the western fringe of Europe. Okay?
It's the kind of the concentric circles here.
Up in the centre, almost a full ring or a penannular around it. Also something we've been noticed now, it's not but a kind of a dip in the apex or it being cupped as well. You'll find it here.
How old do you think they are, Jim?
I think they're at least 5,000 years old. Okay. There, okay, here, right, and you see that again on the corner, the cup, the hollow. Another thing which we have discovered, which I would term edge grooving along the edge. One other thing here, the bedrock mainly, it is practically totally limestone, but here, running through here, we've got all right down. And in fact we're a watershed here between waters going to the Erne, Loch McNeil, the Erne, sinking this side, goes to the Shannon pot and enters the Shannon. Right, so we have an impermeable barrier running through here, an igneous. There's a pre-glacial river ran. Do you see that? Kind of a V shape. There's a gully, a gorge up there, way before the last ice age came tumbling down here. Over that, what we might call dry waterfall, into this area and went underground, and they're huge relic caves between here and Loch McNean. They're no longer active, they're no longer being fed, but in way prehistoric, hundreds of thousands of years ago, they were active caves. But the Ice Age changed the whole shape of the land.
I'm joined now by Cavan County Council's Director of Service, Owen Doyle. Thanks for joining us, Owen.
Thank you, Angie.
So what does this launch or event mean today for tourism?
Well, what it means, it's a significant step forward in the development of the Burren project. And what that is the development of an interpretive centre, or walks through one of the most unique landscapes, not only in the country but internationally. And really it's a step forward in raising awareness of how this site is ecologically and archaeologically so unique, and how with the investment of €1 million in partnership with Gaeltacht, we can actually preserve this first of all, but also promote it in a very structured way for tourism for Cavan.
So why has it been decided upon now to develop this, Owen?
Well, it's the product of about 10 or 15 years of work, and going back sometimes, it's been part of the strategic thinking of Cavan County Council to look at West Cavan and develop it as an ecologically sensitive location and a niche type of tourism for archaeology, ecology, people who like being out in the outdoors. So through that, the inclusion of Cavan in the Marble Arch Caves Global Geopark has raised the profile, and through inter-array cross-border funding we've been able to develop that type of concept in these projects. And this project, if you like, is born out of the Border Uplands project, which is an inter-array cross-border project. So in a sense the strategy has led to the funding, and the funding now leads to the implementation.
I'm joined now by Bill Murphy from Gaeltacht. Thanks for joining us, Bill. What does today mean?
Well, this is a really important project for Gaeltacht. One of our core values is about supporting local communities, and through our recreation and other activities like environment, we see it as a way really of helping and supporting local communities. We've done a lot of research on this, and we would reckon that people visiting our forests, it generates about €270 million of economic activity in local communities like Black Lion, and we think this is going to be very important in delivering that for this local area.
So will this be one of your bigger projects then, Bill?
We have over 150 recreation sites around the country. At the moment, this is one of our biggest projects, but we have areas like Lough Key Forest Park, and we have 11 forest parks around the country. We have mountain bike trails. This is another one. This is probably one of the most important ones from the whole archaeological viewpoint, because it's such an important area for archaeology in the country.
I'm delighted to be joined now by Leo Varadkar, who's the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport. Thanks for joining us, Minister.
That's all, it's a pleasure.
Have you enjoyed your walk around the Burren so far?
Yeah, I wasn't really aware of the site before. I'd heard a little bit about it, but I think most people associate the Burren with County Clare. But what's here in the Burren Geopark here in Cavan, and Fermanagh as well, is fascinating. I've kind of an interest in archaeology, so there's quite a lot of archaeological features here. In addition to that, there's a lot of geological features as well. And
of course, in terms of tourism, it's going to be a huge, impact, or it's going to be a huge boost for the local area.
Yeah, I think it will be. The plan is to put in a car park, a visitor centre, and then trails around some of the sites to make them accessible to people. So I think it is something that could certainly attract a lot of people to the area.
We hope you've enjoyed this special feature on tourism with us today, and I'm sorry, but that's all we have time for. So we have to say goodbye from the glorious sunshine of West Cavan. Thank you for watching.